speculate. I won't talk in any detail about what, if any, changes there might be to our security posture in Ankara. I can just assure you and assure the American people that we take the safety and security of our ambassadors and our embassy personnel very, very seriously. If I could just mention, we also do take seriously the safety and security of Americans that are overseas, whether they're on business or on travel for pleasure. That's why it was so important for our embassy to issue that security message to warn people to stay away because of their proximity to this event. So it's something we always look at, we always amend as needed, and we never ever talk about the details of that. Yeah.
UN Special Envoy Staffan de Mistura said he plans to convene peace talks in Geneva in February.
Yeah.
Does the U.S. have any comment or statement?
We've seen those comments, and if in fact it can be done in February, we would certainly welcome that. I think you heard the Secretary talk to this last week, that we want to see a return to political talks as soon as possible. So if in fact it can happen in early February, that would be very welcome. Yeah. Yeah.
Iraq, Mosul. Both the New York Times and Washington Post over the weekend reported that there are serious difficulties in the liberation of Mosul, both in the slow pace of the operation and in the humanitarian situation. Do you think that you, or at least Baghdad, which had the lead, that the difficulties in Mosul were underestimated?
Well, first of all, I would commend the reporting in both the Washington Post and the New York Times. I mean, those are very thoughtful pieces about a very dynamic, very fluid, very challenging environment. And there's no question. I think everybody knew well in advance of the Mosul campaign kicking off that it was going to be difficult, and that there was going to be humanitarian needs on a major scale as a result of the campaign. You know, I remember being asked many months ago about, you know, why hasn't Mosul kicked off yet, and what's the delay, and why aren't you putting more effort into spurring Iraq to mount that campaign sooner? And back then we said, because it's going to be hard, and because there's a lot of planning that needs to go into it, not just pre-planning or even implementation, but thinking about post-liberation. And so there was a lot of that thought, and there was a lot of that planning, and there has been a lot of effort put into the humanitarian aspect of this. And just, if you don't mind, I'll walk through just a little bit of it. Now, as I say this, I also want to say right at the outset that we're mindful there's still work to be done. We're mindful that there are still internally displaced people, and that there are still needs that have to be met. I'm not at all suggesting that the reporting is inaccurate. We know that there are many people being pushed out because of the campaign there, and that they are, some of them, in desperate need. But there was a lot of thought given to this, and there has been a lot of effort applied to it. Since the 17th of October, UN and humanitarian partners have provided more than 130,000 people with USAID-funded relief kits, nearly 163,000. Nearly 164,000 people with household items, and approximately 185,000 people with 30-day food rations. Relief groups have also provided medical care to almost 50,000 people. Since the start of the operation, more than 100,000 have been provided shelter in camps or local communities. There continue to be spaces available, more than 40,000 spaces available for additional internally displaced people who we do anticipate now being in need as a result of the Mosul operations. On December 8th, just a little bit ago, USAID funded UN partners, the World Food Program, UNICEF, UN Populations Fund, provided food, hygiene kits, water purification tablets, water containers, and other critical relief items to more than 42,000 people in eastern Mosul, making this the single largest humanitarian aid delivery in eastern Mosul since the current conflict began. So, look, that's just a little bit of the metrics to show the degree to which and the specificity to which these kinds of needs were anticipated. Again, not disputing the reporting, not disputing that more needs to be done, and that we're going to continue to work with the government of Iraq and with the UN and other agencies to constantly assess the situation on the ground and adjust as necessary.
Well, Well, would you know then why, if there's space available, the Washington Post says that humanitarian agencies say in Mosul say they don't have enough aid, to meet the need? Is
Well,
it that
as I
people
said-
can't get out, or?
As I said, we hold it that there is space available, more than 40,000 spaces available. And if there's a disconnect, we'll see what we can do to close that disconnect, to close that seam. And as I also said, we're in constant communication with the UN and other aid agencies and organizations, and we'll continue to do that. But I want to underscore here that while we have thought this through and while we have done these things, we recognize there's still a challenge out there. We're not at all rejecting that premise, and we're not at all saying that there aren't people in need. Maybe it's just that they don't know where to go. So maybe it's really just an issue of trying to help them get to where they need to be. But we're all mindful of this. And as to your question on the pace of it, as we also always said that this was going to be a long, tough fight, it's proving to be a long, tough fight. And it's only going to go as fast, and it's only going to go as far as the Iraqi security forces are able to do it. On their schedule, on their plan, this is their campaign. We're going to continue to support it.
If I could ask two related questions. Secretary Kerry was in Riyadh over the weekend. Maybe even you were with him.
No,
Anyhow,
he's not back yet, so I know I wasn't there.
you weren't with him. Okay, but did he discuss the fight against ISIS while he was in Riyadh, or are the Saudis still part of the anti-ISIS coalition?
They are a major contributor in terms of humanitarian needs and other such contributions. Certainly, they're a part of the coalition, absolutely. And yes, they did talk about the counter-Daesh fight. But the primary focus, as I think you saw from the Secretary's comments himself, was really about Yemen and trying to get to a better outcome there.
Can you inform us what they discussed about the counter-Daesh fight?
I think I'd leave it to the traveling team to read out those discussions, and you saw the Secretary's press conference himself. Obviously, they talked about the need to continue to keep the pressure on Daesh. They talked about the progress that we've made against the organization, and yet they also, I think, squarely acknowledged that there's more to be done. Sure.
Well, can I just one more on Baghdadi? You announced $25 million for Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. What explains the timing? Is it related to concerns about ISIS terrorism that have prompted the Raqqa operation to be accelerated or something like that?
I'm not aware that there was a particular trigger here. I think Brett McGurk and our Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Diplomatic Security talked about this on Friday. But look, I mean, we have to continue to look for ways to put pressure on Daesh. And this is a group that is under stress, no question about it. But this particular decision on Baghdadi is very much in keeping with our broader efforts to continue to try to degrade and destroy this group. And I wouldn't link the timing of the announcement to any one thing. We certainly know he's still out there. We certainly know that he's in a leadership role, and that makes him a legitimate national security threat.
So it's just kind of out of the blue. For your
I wouldn't say it was out of the blue. I mean, we don't just.
What causes it?
I think I answered the question. Brad.
Over the weekend, there were Iranian calls for a P5+1 plus Iran meeting. They're still quite peeved about the Iran Sanctions Act extension. Is that something the United States would be amenable to?
Well, as you know, the Joint Commission was set up to talk about compliance issues and to provide a forum to do that. So certainly it's within Iran's purview to ask for a Joint Commission meeting to talk about this as they see it in terms of compliance. What I would just simply repeat is that the Iran Sanctions Act was in place at the time the JCPOA was negotiated and has remained in place. Its extension is not a violation of the JCPOA and does not reintroduce or reimpose any nuclear-related secondary sanctions that were waived on implementation day, nor does it impose any new nuclear-related sanctions. So while we didn't believe the act needed to be extended, its extension as written in law does not violate it. We stand by that, as well as the Secretary's intention to continue to waive as necessary those specific sanctions. Yeah. So, but again, look, I mean, if they call for that, certainly that's their purview to do it, and and we would participate.
So that was, so do you expect this meeting, what level would this meeting be at? Just
I don't know.
technical level?
I don't know. It's hypothetical at this point.
Okay, and then one other Iran questions. There were some pictures, plenty of them actually, of IRGC Commander Qasem Soleimani in Aleppo. I know this isn't the first time he's traveled abroad, despite his ban on international travel. Is this something you guys plan to raise at any level, or have you kind of given up on enforcement?
No, we do intend to consult with our partners on the Security Council about how to address our concerns with this. We've long said that Iran needs to choose whether it's going to play a positive role in helping peacefully resolve conflicts, such as in Syria, or whether it will choose to prolong them. And you're absolutely right. His travel is a violation. He's one of the designated individuals. No exemption to the travel ban was sought, and so it does constitute a violation of UNSCR 2231. As I said, we fully anticipate bringing this up inside the council.
Yeah, the last, well, not the last time, but previously there's been talk of him visiting Moscow. I think confirmation of him at least once visiting Moscow. How did that go when you brought that up in the sanctions committee, given that Russia was
I don't have the history here in front of me. Let me see if we can get, I know we raised it, but I don't recall what the outcome was. We'll get you that. That's just a bit of history I don't have. Dave?
This morning our time, I don't know what time it was in France, Christine Lagarde, the director of the IMF, was convicted of negligence in a French court for actions she committed before she became director of the IMF. Does the United States still have confidence in her as the leader of an international organization?
We're not going to make a judgment here about the court's decision. I think we are still studying it, and I think I would reserve a statement or conclusion by the United States until we've had a chance to review it further. Yeah.
So can we go to Asia?
Sure.
So Secretary Russell was in Japan this weekend. I was wondering if you had any readouts.
I don't actually. You're right. He was in Tokyo. And as I understand, he's wrapping up his visit. So we'll have to get back to you on a readout of his discussions. I just don't have that here as of the time we came out.
And also, I hope I can ask about the drone that was seized in the South China Sea. So first, are there any updates?
Unmanned underwater vehicle.
Yeah.
UUV, not drone. But
underwater drone?
Please go ahead.
So I was wondering
it's
if
not an underwater drone. I think I know what I'm talking about on this one.
My apologies. I'm wondering if there's any updates since this weekend and the talks about maybe getting it back, or...
I think my Pentagon colleague addressed this just a few minutes ago. As we are given to understand it here at the State Department, there are discussions going on now, military to military, to arrange the return of the UUV. I don't believe the details of that have been fleshed out, so I'll let DoD speak to how that's all going to transpire.
And I was just wondering, so I know you've spoken very much about freedom of navigation. And when it comes to these UUVs, is that included within that definition? Because as far as my understanding, it was like taking the temperature of the water and all that. So is that also freedom of navigation?
Well, I think the short answer to your question is yes. I don't know exactly what you're asking, but let me just back up a little bit. The device that we're talking about it's a scientific research device. It's meant to help us with oceanographic studies. Now, I don't know. Maybe you know more than me. I don't know what specifically they had tasked this UUV to do on that particular day, but it was doing oceanographic work and only oceanographic work. And there's many different tasks that you can put these tools to. So again, I don't know whether it was temperature taking or what. And again, DoD can speak to that. But it absolutely was operating inside international waters, and it was absolutely performing necessary scientific research, certainly within the bounds of international law. And the absconding with it acted against that very international law, which is, again, why we're going to get it back. Okay? Yeah.
So do you see it